भिक्षानमात्रेण चतुष्टिमन्तः विशोकमन्तः करणे चरन्तः कौपीनवन्तः खलु भाग्यवन्तः मूलं तरो केवलमाश्रयन्तः पाणिद्वयं भोक्तुममन्त्रयन्तः कन्थामवाश्रीमपि कोत्सयन्तः कौपीनवन्तः खलु भाग्यवन्तः स्वानन्दभावो परितुष्टिमन्तः सुशान्त सर्वेन्द्रियवृत्तिमन्तः अहर्निशं ब्रह्मसुखे रमन्तः कौपीनवन्तः खलु भाग्यवन्तः देहादिभावं परिपूर्णयन्तः स्वात्मानमात्मन्यवलोकयन्तः नान्तं न मध्यं न बहिस्मरन्तः कौपीनवन्तः खलु भाग्यवन्तः ब्रह्माक्षरं पावनमुच्चरन्तो ब्रह्माहमस्मीति विभावयन्तः भिक्षाशिनो दिक्षु परिभ्रमन्तः भिक्षाशिनो दिक्षु परिभ्रमन्तः कौपीनवन्तः खलु भाग्यवन्तः कौपीनवन्तः खलु भाग्यवन्तः We'll start by giving the translation of this beautiful hymn by Shankaracharya on the monk who roams about wearing only a loincloth, a kopin, roaming ever in the grove of Vedanta, ever pleased with his beggar's morsel, wandering onward, his heart free from sorrow. Blessed indeed is the wearer of the loincloth. Sitting at the foot of a tree for shelter, eating from his hands his meager portion, spurning wealth like a patched-up garment. Blessed indeed is the wearer of the loincloth. Satisfied fully by the bliss within him, curbing wholly the cravings of his senses, delighting day and night in the bliss of Brahman. Blessed indeed is the wearer of the loincloth. Witnessing the changes of mind and body, naught but the self within him beholding, heedless of outer, of inner, of middle. Blessed indeed is the wearer of the loincloth. Chanting Brahman, the word of redemption, meditating only on I am Brahman, living on alms and wandering freely, blessed indeed is the wearer of the loincloth. So that, I thought, was a good introduction for the topic today, which is the call of the Spirit. And the idea is that the Spirit is always calling us. And the question is, how do we respond to that call? That's the question I'm going to leave with you. How do we respond to the call of the Spirit? The absolute reality, the ever-existent, infinite consciousness and bliss, which has so many names. In Vedanta we call it as Brahman. It is ever shining in our hearts. It is the very basis of everything. It is at the heart of reality, at the heart of everything we see is that reality. It is eternally present now, right here. Swami Vivekananda says, I have seen nothing but God all my life, nor have you. He is everywhere saying, I am. The moment you feel, I am, you are conscious of existence. Where shall we go to find God if we cannot see Him in our own hearts and in every living being? So if we can say, I am, if we just think, I am, yes, I exist, I am, then we are conscious of our own existence. Actually, our own existence is just a pale reflection of the existence absolute, which is Brahman, which is the divine ground of everything. So, yes, the Spirit is constantly saying, I am. And yet the tragedy is that so few of us are aware of it. Most of the people in this world are completely unaware that the Spirit is calling to us constantly. So, let us try. Can we hear the Spirit calling us to say, here, be aware of yourself, be aware of your true self, know who you are. What a tremendous blessing to hear the call of the Spirit. And our destiny depends on how we respond to that call. We have all heard the call, who are present here, or we wouldn't be here today on a Sunday morning, a cloudy Sunday morning. Who will come to Vedanta Center? We have all heard the call of the Spirit, or we wouldn't be here. I would like to tell now, and I'll read at some length from some reminiscences of two women, two disciples of Swami Vivekananda, Mrs. Mary Funky and Miss Christina Greenstidle, both of Detroit, Michigan, and how they responded to the call of Swami Vivekananda. They were both living in Detroit. Remember, this was in 1894. And there was no TV, no radio, no movies. So what would people do? They would go to lectures. And there were traveling lecturers who would go from city to city and give lectures and give talks. And of course there would be theatrical productions and things like that for entertainment. But how to get to learn things? Not through Google. You'd go to a lecture. So this is Christina Greenstidle. There are times when life flows on in a steady, deadly stream of monotony. She's describing before they met Swami Vivekananda. Eating, sleeping, talking, the same weary round. Commonplace thoughts, stereotyped ideas, the eternal treadmill. Tragedy comes. For a moment it shocks us into stillness. But we cannot keep still. The merry-go-round stops neither for our sorrow nor our happiness. Surely, this is not all there is to life. This is not what we are here for. Restlessness comes. What are we waiting for? then one day it happens. That stupendous thing for which we have been waiting, that which dispels the deadly monotony, which turns the whole life into a new channel. Our restlessness is stilled forever. So this is her introduction to how dreadful life seemed. It seemed to have lost all meaning. It seemed to have lost all savor, just going through the motions of life, because it was all on the plane of matter. So that's called flatland by one Western philosopher, Ken Wilber. He calls it flatland when you don't acknowledge the deeper dimensions of spirit. Because yes, it's three-dimensional here, but it's all on one plane of matter. And so there's no depth to it, so it's flat. So she is describing this life in flatland, completely just monotony and going through the motions. For what? Isn't there something more than just this, what we see here? So this is, now comes the very inspiring event. Little did I think, when I reluctantly set out one cold February night in 1894 to attend a lecture at the Unitarian Church in Detroit, that I was doing something which would change the whole course of my life and be of such stupendous import that it could not be measured by previous standards I had known. Attending lectures had been part of the deadly monotony. How seldom did one hear anything new or uplifting? The lecturers who had come to Detroit that winter had been unusually dull. So unvarying had been the disillusion that one had given up hope, and with it the desire to hear more. So that I went very unwillingly to this particular lecture to hear one Vivekananda, a monk from India, and only in response to the pleading of my friend, Mrs. Mary C. Funke. With her beautifully optimistic nature, she had kept her illusions and still believed that someday she would find that something. We went to hear this man from India. So what's so inspiring is that she was dragged to this yet another lecture by her friend, thinking, oh God, here we go, another lecture. And then she writes, it's so inspiring. Surely never in our countless incarnations had we taken a step so momentous. For before we had listened 5 minutes, we knew that we had found the touchstone for which we had searched so long. In one breath we exclaimed, if we had missed this. Which of us who heard him then can ever forget what soul memories were stirred within us when we heard the ancient message of India? Hear, ye children of immortal bliss, even ye who dwell in higher spheres. I have found the Ancient One, knowing whom alone ye shall be saved from death over again. Swamiji's one of his famous quotes, which he quoting from Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Hear, ye children of immortal bliss. This is the call of the Spirit. The Rishi is calling, I have found that one. Ye are all children of immortal bliss. This is a messenger, Swami Vivekananda, the great messenger, bringing that call of the Spirit to the ears and to the parched hearts of the people of Detroit in 1894. Or the story of the lion and the sheep. Blessed truth, in spite of your bleating, your timidity, your fear, you are not sheep. You are and always have been the lion, powerful, fearless, the king of beasts. It is only an illusion that is to be overcome. You are that now. So she's giving a little taste of the message that they received from Swamiji just in those lectures. We knew we had found our teacher. The word guru we did not know then, nor did we meet him personally. But what matter? It would take years to assimilate what we had already learned. And then the master would somehow, somewhere, teach us again. So it is said that when the time is ripe, when the disciple is ready, the Guru comes. And so we can see in Christina Greenstittle's case that she was so ready. She was thirsting. She was thirsting for something more. She had this restlessness. And then, what a tremendous blessing, the Guru came and she could meet the Guru in the form of Swami Vivekananda. And she recognized the tremendousness of this event. As she writes, in countless incarnations, never had we taken a step so momentous. So she recognizes what an incredible blessing it was. And they didn't even know him personally. They hadn't met him, just seen him on the platform in a big church, the Unitarian Church. And, but that was going to change. Now let me read from Mary Funky. So she writes, he, meaning Swami Vivekananda, always loved Detroit and was grateful for all the kindness and courtesy shown him. We had no chance to meet him in a personal way at the time, but we listened and pondered in our hearts over all that we heard him say, resolving to find him sometime, somewhere, even if we had to go across the world to do it. We lost trace of him completely for nearly 2 years and thought that probably he had returned to India. But one afternoon, we were told by a friend that he was still in this country and that he was spending the summer at Thousand Island Park. So actually, it was not nearly 2 years, it was 1 year and 4 months. But after meeting Swamiji, the time separated from him would have been stretched out. It would have been a long time, right? So it must have felt like 2 years. So what happened? This Thousand Island Park is 400 miles from Detroit. Detroit is up in Michigan by the Great Lakes. Thousand Island Park is just a little bit further it's to the east, right on the border with Canada in the St. Lawrence River and all of that. And so she writes, we started the next morning, resolved to seek him out and ask him to teach us. We're reading from reminiscences of Mary Funky, how they got to become disciples of Swami Vivekananda. And such the tremendous inspiration. So they had met Swamiji in Detroit, they had seen Swamiji in Detroit, and wondering, when will we meet him again, when will we meet him again? They hear that he's spending the summer in Thousand Island Park. The very next day, can you imagine? And in 1894, they quickly packed some bags and started off. I don't know if they would have taken trains and horse carriages, and I don't know, finally they had to take a boat to get to Thousand Island Park. So we started the next morning, resolved to seek him out and ask him to teach us. At last, after a weary search, we found him. We were feeling very much frightened at our temerity in thus intruding upon his privacy, but he had lighted a fire in our souls that could not be quenched. We must know more of this wonderful man and his teaching. So their hour had struck, their time has come to find their teacher. And with this intense longing, really, it's incredible that here he's in Thousand Island Park. The next day they start out, and they're frightened, of course, they're nervous because they're going unannounced just to go see him. But they set aside all those thoughts. They knew they had to go. So this is kind of the idea I'm trying to hint at. How do we respond when we hear the call of the Spirit? In the case of these two young women, they heard the call of the Spirit and they answered. They dropped everything. They had to go find this man again. And this is truly remarkable. It was a dark, rainy night, but we could not wait. So they've reached Thousand Island Park, and it's, of course, it's very dark. I don't know if it was electrified at that time, almost surely not. Remote island like that. It was a dark, rainy night, but we could not wait. Every moment was precious, and our imagination was stirred up to the nth degree. We did not know a soul in the place, but finally we hit upon the plan of making inquiries at the various shops and thus find out where Miss Dutcher lived. Apparently they had a name, Miss Dutcher and Thousand Island Park. At one place we were told that there was a cottage occupied by a Miss Dutcher, and that a, quote, foreign-looking man who dressed queerly, unquote, was staying there. Aha! Then we knew, she writes, then we knew our quest was ended, and we found a man with a lantern who went ahead of us. And then this fear comes. Would he accept us? And if he did not, then what would we do? It suddenly seems to us that it might be a foolish thing to go several hundred miles to find a man who did not even know of our existence. But we plodded on up the hill in the rain and darkness, up the wet and slippery path. It seemed as if we were taking one step up and two back. It was so slippery. The first thing we heard when we reached the house was the rich, beautiful voice of the Swami, who was talking to those who had gathered on his porch. Our heartbeats could have been heard, I truly believe. His hostess asked him to come downstairs to see us as two ladies from Detroit, and he greeted us so sweetly. It was like a benediction. I like Detroit, he said. I have many friends there, isn't it? Speaking of this in after years, our guru would refer to us as my disciples, who traveled hundreds of miles to find me, and they came in the night and in the rain. A little bit more. We had thought of what to say to him, but when we realized that we had really found him, we instantly forgot all our fine speeches, and one of us blurted out, "We came from Detroit and Mrs. P sent us to you." The other said, "We have come to you just as we would go to Jesus if he were still on the earth and ask him to teach us." He looked at us so kindly and said gently, "If only I possessed the power of the Christ to set you free now." So that's the story of how these two women became disciples of Swami Vivekananda. They were invited to join the class that evening, and then they went back to their hotel, but they were told, "Come again in the morning." And then they were invited to join the community, and they stayed in the cottage along with the other. Altogether, there were about 12 people crowded into that little cottage, and they spent blessed many weeks with Swami Vivekananda there from June 18 to August 6. They must have arrived at some point after June 18, because, but they had this blessed time in the company of their teacher. So how they were driven. I love that line that she put, he had lit a fire in our soul that could not be extinguished, right? So that fire actually burns in all of us, and it can't be extinguished. Only we have to become aware of it. That fire of yearning for truth, that fire of knowing God, of seeking for God, that fire is burning in every heart. But in most people, it's covered up. So when we start to uncover that fire, then let it blaze more brightly, because that is the fire that takes us all the way to God. So there in Thousand Island Park, Swami Vivekananda was full of the spirit of the monk, which is why I also chanted that hymn at the beginning. And Mary Funky, she writes, "There were 12 of us, and it seemed as if Pentecostal fire descended and touched the Master. One afternoon, when he had been telling us of the glory of renunciation, of the joy and freedom of those of the ochre robe, he suddenly left us, and in a short time he had written his Song of the Sannyasin, a very passion of sacrifice and renunciation." So this poem, the Song of the Sannyasin, it's really, of course, for us monks, it's like an ode to the ideal of what we're striving for. And so one might ask, well, we're not monks here. Why are you going to tell us about the song of the sannyasin? I think in the heart of every sincere seeker, every sincere devotee, there's something of the monk or the nun. Because that ideal which we Swamis, at least this Swami, is only aspiring to that ideal, haven't attained that ideal, but that beautiful, complete reliance on the divine, letting go of everything else because he or she sees God in everything. And Swami Vivekananda actually initiated several disciples into monastic life at Thousand Island Park. He initiated several disciples into brahmacharya and 2 into sannyasa. That was French woman, Mary Louise, who became Abhayananda, Swami Abhayananda, or Swamini, I guess one could say, and Leon Landsberg became Swami Kripananda. So he was full of that fire of the monk's ideal. So it's no wonder that Mrs. Funky, Mary Funky, she wrote, I had a vague idea that to live in a cave and wear a yellow robe would be the proper thing to do if one wished to develop spiritually. How foolish of me, and how wise Swamiji was. He said, you are a householder. Go back to Detroit. Find God in your husband and family. That is your path at present. So he of course, he inspired all of them, but he said, yes, those of you who are householders, find God in your family, find God in your household and in your life, find God there. But he also recognized that a few were called to monastic life, and for them he said, you find God in the life of brahmacharya and sannyasa. And Sister Christine was one of those. Sister Christine was called to be a nun, and she became a nun. She was Christina Greenstidle, but she became known as Sister Christine. The A got converted to an E somehow. So Swami Vivekananda initiated her into brahmacharya, I believe there at Thousand Island Park itself. Sister Nivedita has a beautiful definition of brahmacharya. Literally, it means moving in Brahman. The idea is that everywhere we see Brahman, we are established in Brahman. Nivedita says, the ideal of the life of the student, with its mingling of solitude, austerity, and intense concentration of thought. So typically, the brahmacharan, the celibate student, after his or her studies, marry and enter the householder stage of life. There are few who are called to lifelong brahmacharya, and they will become monks and nuns. So either way, whether we are called to be a monk or a nun, or we are called to be a householder, if we are sincere seekers of God, then, according to Swami Vivekananda, we are called to see God in everyone and in everything. Which is Mrs. Funky writing from Thousand Island Park to one of her friends. We are taught to see God in everything, from the blade of grass to man, even in the diabolical man. In his talks, he may go ever so far afield, but always he comes back to the one fundamental, vital thing: find God. Nothing else matters. So this is the call. Find God. Nothing else matters. How did Mary Funky and Christina Greenstidle respond to that call? They dropped everything and ran to Thousand Island Park. So in spiritual life, when we really hear that call, when we want to dive deep, there's a certain amount of giving up we have to do. That we have to give up the thoughts that what will people say? People say that I've become a religious fanatic or something. Vedanta is the least fanatical of religious traditions. But if we want to be serious about it, we're going to have to set aside time every day for meditation and spiritual practices. Our lives are so full. Something has to be given up. Something has to drop. We have to let something go if we're going to do spiritual practices. We are going to have to do something. So they were completely inspired by that ideal of all-encompassing yearning and dedication, to throw their lot in with the Lord, as it were. I read that line once in a little booklet about joining a Christian monastery. It was a book for people who were interested in joining a Christian monastery, and they had that line, throw your lot in with the Lord. I like that idea of complete surrender. But we don't have to be monks to throw our lot in with the Lord. If we dedicate our lives to God, then we're throwing our lot in with the Lord. And then, come what may, we're with God and God is with us. So, and to give up. To give up the desires for name and fame, for pleasure, for wealth, to want God alone, for nothing else matters. It becomes easy when we really want God, then naturally things fall away. The things that are holding us back. As Swamiji puts in his song, the Song of the Sannyasin, says, thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on. So we're caught in life, it seems. We're getting dragged through life. And there's a rope. It seems like there's a rope. How do we cut that rope? And then Swamiji says, thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on. Then cease lament. Let go thy hold. Sannyasin bold. Say Om Tat Sat Om. I'd like to, let's see, how's our time? Let's read a verse from the Song of the Sannyasin. We'll start with we'll read the first verse. Every stanza ends with Sannyasin bold, say Om Tat Sat Om. Om is the word of Brahman. Is Brahman. Om is Brahman. Om is the fundamental mantra, the Shabda Brahman, the vibration out of which this whole universe is manifested. The best word for that is Om. And of course, the tradition of sannyasa actually was established by, it goes back to prehistory, certainly, but Shankaracharya codified it and organized it, and so it falls into the Advaita Vedanta school. There are monks in all the different schools, but the sannyasa as this of the Dashanami Sampradaya, as Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda, is in that lineage which traces itself back to Shankaracharya. And the idea is that our true self is infinite consciousness and bliss. And here, let's read the first stanza. Wake up the note, the song that had its birth far off, where worldly taint could never reach, in mountain caves and glades of forest deep, whose calm no sigh for lust or wealth or fame could ever dare to break, where rolled the stream of knowledge, truth, and bliss that follows both. Sing high that note, Sannyasin bold, say Om Tat Sat Om. So, some thoughts that occur to me on this beautiful opening to this ode to the monastic life is, first of all, it's an ancient tradition. And the rishis have proclaimed bliss from the caves and the foresty glades in the Himalayas. And it was born far off, not only perhaps in distance, but in time. It was born far off. That song of renunciation, that song of the monk, it was born in ancient times. And yet, we have to wake up that note. Why? Because, let's face it, we're still asleep to the reality of the spirit, at least much of the time. We still take this world to be fundamentally real, and the spirit to be some kind of imagination. Actually, it's opposite. It is the spirit which is absolutely real, and this world is some kind of imagination. Well, we shouldn't say imagination, but it's only temporarily real. It has its reality, but it's a temporary reality. And let's sing high that note. Why sing? Because it's a song of joy. It's a song of eternal joy. Our true nature is joy. Though the ideal of sannyasa embodies this renunciation of all desire for enjoyment, that sounds a little dry. And besides, if we see even someone like Swami Vivekananda, we don't see him as a dry someone. He's full of joy. That's the emphasis, actually, for sannyasa, is focusing on our true nature as infinite joy, as infinite bliss, as infinite consciousness. So we give up that which we are not, and it becomes easy. It falls off of itself. And of course, this Om Tat Sat Om is like a formula. Om, that existence. It's the designation of Brahman. It's Om Tat Sat is also spoken of in the Gita as the kind of formula. That Tat Sat, that Sat is the existence, that infinite existence. Om, that infinite existence. Om, Hari Om, Tat Sat. Swami Swahanandaji, I don't know how many of you got to meet him, but he used to, now and then he would say, Hari Om, Hari Om, as if invoking, calling to his mind the reality of his own true self and of everything. The way he would say it was beautiful. Hari Om, Hari Om. And we used to joke sometimes if some of us young novices were with him and he would say Hari Om, Hari Om. We'd wonder, oh, was it something I thought? Did I think some bad thought? And so he's canceling it by saying Hari Om, Hari Om. So that calm, which no sigh for lust or wealth or fame could ever dare to break. Let's face it, these are the big obstacles in spiritual life and in life in general. These are the ones that cause us so much trouble and cause us so much pain also. Sri Ramakrishna used to emphasize especially the first two. The desire for sex and the desire for money. These are the ones that are very difficult to overcome. And a little more subtle than that, but equally formidable, is the desire for fame, the desire to be known. So this is the challenge for all of us in spiritual life. And when those completely fall away, when that calm cannot be broken by even a sigh for any of those, then the stream of knowledge, truth, and bliss rolls down and fills our hearts. So let's sing that note. Whether we are householders or monks, we have to sing that note, that beautiful note. One of the glories of Indian culture to me is the recognition of this call of the spirit, as I'm calling it, this recognition that yes, some people are so called by God that they are not going to live an ordinary life of just work and earning money and having your enjoyments and raising a family and all those things. Those are all right, but there's a deeper dimension to life. And everyone is eligible to deepen their life. And for some, it becomes so extreme that they give up everything. And there's a rather surprising line that Swami Vivekananda describes something that happens sometimes. Sometimes, he says, the thing comes upon them in a flash. There was a boy, for instance, who used to come to read the Upanishads with Vedanta. One day he turned and said, "Sir, is all this really true?" "Oh yes," said Vedanta. "It may be difficult to realize, but it is certainly true." And the next day, that boy was a silent sannyasin, nude, on his way to Kedarnath. So in this case, a young man studying with Abhedananda became so filled with his ideal that he went nude, completely just throwing off everything, walking to Kedarnath, the mountain temple to Shiva in the Himalayas. So India recognizes that and supports it, and that's why I also felt it was such a blessing to be able to live in India for some time as a monk, because here it's not really understood. You know, to tell a personal anecdote, my mother, when I joined the monastery, she would, as mothers do, they tell their friends what their kids are doing. And so people would ask my mother, "Well, how's your son?" And "Oh, he's become a monk. He's joined a monastery." And the universal reply of all her friends was, "Oh, I'm sorry." That's the idea. Where did we go wrong? What did we do wrong that the monk's life is for losers? They couldn't make it in the world. They couldn't find a wife. They couldn't get a job. Okay, so they joined a monastery. There are a few monks like that, but they're failures. There's no joy. And that's one of the tragedies when someone joins a monastery who shouldn't join a monastery. They will be miserable and they'll make others miserable. And that's a tragedy. And monastic life is not for everybody. It's for a few people. Most people should live a spiritual life, but in families and all of that. It's very few who are called to monastic life, and it's a tragedy if one does. But equally tragic is one who is called to monastic life, but then ends up marrying and raising a family, because they won't enjoy. Their hearts won't be in it. And to raise a family properly, your heart has to be in it. You have to give your time to your kids. Raising children is no joke. We have to be there, love them, hold them, teach them, and give the time more than anything. So many parents nowadays, they stick an iPad in their children's hands and leave them for hours. So they're just glued to this thing. That's not raising kids. No, we have to give the time to the children. And if your heart is longing for giving everything up, then don't have kids. Join a monastery instead. Okay, so I don't know how much more I should say about monastic life. So let's quote some more from Swami Vivekananda. To the Oriental, the Occidental is the dreamer. See, in the West we say, "Oh, those Orientals, those Indians, they're dreamers, no? Always thinking of God and entirely impractical, and like that." And he says, on the contrary, to the Oriental, the Occidental is the dreamer, playing with the dolls of a 5 minutes fancy. He laughed to think that grown men and women should make so much of a handful of matter, which sooner or later they will have to leave. Can you not see the tide of death and materialism that is rolling over these Western lands? How long will you keep the bandage over your eyes? Can you not see the power of lust and unholiness that is eating into the very vitals of society? Well, it's a pretty strong statement. But if we look at society, yes, this lust and unholiness is eating into the very vitals of society. Absolutely. So what's the remedy, according to Swamiji? Spirituality and renunciation. And he wanted some young men and women to not marry and join the monastic order, not in the ancient times of just go to the Himalayas and meditate and beg your food. He founded the Ramakrishna order with a special ideal of renunciation and service. Atmano mokshartham jagadhitaya. For one's illumination, but also, and tied inextricably to that, for the welfare of others, for the good of all. As Swami Vivekananda said, for the good of many, for the happiness of many, is the sannyasin born. The sannyasin, verily, this is the ideal. Not that I'm striving, I'm not trying to praise myself, because we're only trying to reach this very high ideal. The sannyasin verily is born into this world to lay down his life for others, to stop the bitter cries of men, to wipe the tears of the widow, to bring peace to the soul of the bereaved mother, to equip the ignorant masses for the struggle for existence, to accomplish the secular and spiritual well-being of all through the diffusion of spiritual teachings, and to arouse the sleeping lion of Brahman in all by throwing in the light of knowledge. So that is Swami Vivekananda's idea of the monastic life. And that he is the perfect exemplar of that. Laying down his life for others is a beautiful ideal. And that's really our life, whether we're a monk or householder. When we're called by the Spirit, we're called to do that. I think I wanted to mention just this idea of vows, because monks in our tradition, we have two ordinations. The first is called the brahmacharya, which is a vow, which is vows. We take certain vows. We say, I will do this, I will not do that. And in the presence of hundreds of monks, we take these statements. It's very similar to a marriage vow. When you get married, you do it in front of the sacred fire, and at least in the Hindu tradition, and in the presence of so many other people. And we say, okay, I dedicate my life to this person. I'm going to have a partnership with this person, and till death us do part. In the Christian vow, until death, I will be with this person. It's a public proclamation that I'm going to lead a pure and holy life, and I have my spouse, and we will support each other spiritually and materially and in every other way. And similarly, the brahmacharya vows that we take are like that. We vow to live a life governed by certain principles and practices which will help us attain our goal, the realization of infinite love and infinite bliss. Many of them are very simple, like, I will get up early in the morning, I will meditate after getting up and washing up, I will meditate every day, I will serve others to the best of my ability, I will try to be like a bee and drink only nectar, and not like the fly and enjoy the filth. Means I will try to see the good in everyone and not look at their defects. I will strive to be utterly dedicated to the divine. And I will lead an unmarried life and practice celibacy and strive to see the Divine Mother in all women. This is, people are a little afraid of this one. Some people think, if I study Vedanta, will I have to practice celibacy? They get frightened. The brahmacharya, the practice of celibacy, it's a question of conservation of energy. And Swami Vivekananda pointed out to his disciples in Thousand Island Park, unchaste imagination is as bad as unchaste action. Controlled desire leads to the highest result. Transform the sexual energy into spiritual energy, but do not emasculate. because that is throwing away the power. The stronger this force, the more can be done with it. So obviously celibacy is meant for monastics, not for householders. For householders, exclusive dedication to one's spouse. Though it should be a natural development. If it's enforced from above, as it were, by a law, and then it doesn't work. I think we all understand that that doesn't work. We have seen it in certain cases. And it's just a natural unfolding, and it's really only possible if one can taste some inner sweetness and joy. And I think even for householders, when they start deepening their spiritual life and they start tasting the inner sweetness and joy, that may also come. That they no longer need the physical relations because they have such a deep spiritual bond. Certainly, the physical relations in married life are important, particularly at the beginning, to help really cement the marital bond. But as in the case of spiritual seekers, as the bond between husband and wife, or nowadays we should say between spouse and spouse, becomes deeper and stronger and gets placed on deeply spiritual foundations, then the physical side becomes less necessary. And in the case of some sincere seekers, it falls away altogether. It's no longer needed because the inner richness becomes so sweet. But talking about this conservation of energy, Swami Vivekananda revealed a fascinating fact. In my first speech in this country, in Chicago, I addressed that audience as sisters and brothers of America. And you know that they all rose to their feet. They did, and they gave him a standing ovation after just those 5 words. You may wonder what made them do this. You may wonder if I had some strange power. Let me tell you that I did have a power. And it is this. Never once in my life did I allow myself to have even one sexual thought. I trained my mind, my thinking, and the powers that man usually uses along that line, I put into a higher channel. And it developed a force so strong that nothing could resist it. So that's a little bit of the ideal of this conservation of power, the redirecting of the power. Now, just a little about the sannyasa, actually in our tradition. So oftentimes they say the vows of sannyasa. Actually, it's not exactly vows. It's more like affirming our true nature as infinite consciousness and bliss. And there is one kind of vow: let no one be afraid of me. Let me not give fear to anyone. I give fearlessness to all. From me, no danger be to aught that lives. And of course, we let go symbolically of all desires for anything else in the fire. Shave our head, we lose that little tiki, the shika, and and I'm laughing because for the brahmacharis in India, you know, they all wear that tail, and it looks so silly, it looks so strange, and so they're all so excited to finally lose that tiki. Or if I finally got rid of that thing. You know, in the market, people look funny, you know, they'll look at you and go, what a tiki. But it's beautiful because it's very symbolic. Because actually, what happens is, the guru cuts it with the scissors. So at the time of sannyasa, even at our Belar Mutt, we have some 30, 40, 50 candidates, and they all go and they lay their head on the President Maharaj's lap, and he has a big pair of scissors, and he cuts it off. And then he gives it to us, and then we throw it in the fire. So it's a beautiful, this symbolizing the guru cutting all the bonds of this world. So, and of course we get a new name and all of that.
You didn't mention the significance. What is the significance to keep the tika?
Well, the tika, it's a traditional sign of a spiritual seeker to have the thing. But what the actual meaning of the shika is, people have different explanations. It's been going on so long. The Brahmins, typically, among the men, the Brahmins will keep a shika, and I think sometimes they even tie something in it, a little, not, but they can tie a little mantra in it or something. And there's that Ram Prasad song, Abhay Pade Pran Shompichi. I have surrendered my soul at the fearless feet of the mother. Can I be afraid still of death? And then Mother Kali's name is the great mantra. I have tied it to my shika. That's in this song. It's a Kalina Moha Mantra Atma Shir Shikai Medhechi. I have tied the Maha Mantra of Mother Kali's name to my shika. And once I saw someone with a little scroll of paper tied in his shika. So, and other people say, well, it's so that God, when you're falling down into hell, God grabs it and pulls you out. So, the meaning of the shika is not fully known, I think. So let me read a couple more quotes from Swami Vivekananda. Apparently one day there was a question class and there was some dispute, and then Swamiji got full of fire. And he said, what the world wants today. And the writer here, that was Sister Nivedita, says, the determination to throw a bomb, as he called it, evidently suddenly taking possession of him. He used to throw these bombs, means a statement that he knew would be so radical, so different, that his audience would be completely stunned, perhaps, and taken aback. So he was determined to throw a bomb in this case. He said, what the world wants today is 20 men and women who can dare to stand in the street yonder and say that they possess nothing but God. Who will go? He had risen to his feet by this time and stood looking round his audience as if begging some of them to join him. Why should one fear? And then, in tones of which, even now, I can hear again the thunderous conviction. If this is true, what else could matter? If it is not true, what do our lives matter? So this really brings it back to our theme today. If this is true, if it is true that God is the absolute reality, then what else matters? And if it is not true, if there is no God, then what does anything matter? What does our life matter? Our life has no meaning, actually. So, Sri Ramakrishna, he was waiting for his disciples. Not only do the sincere seekers look for their teacher, but the true teachers also look for their disciples. And Sri Ramakrishna, the Divine Mother, had shown him that he had his own disciples to whom he could transmit his spiritual wealth. And yet, where were they? They hadn't started coming yet. And he started longing for them. And when at the end of the day, still they wouldn't have come, he would climb up to the roof of the proprietor's mansion at Dakshineshwar, where he was staying at the time. He would climb up to the roof, and he would start crying. He would weep, and he would say, "Come, my children, come to me. Where are you? Come." So that call of Sri Ramakrishna, he's calling for his children to come to him. We like to think that call is still resounding today. He's still calling on his children to come to him. Not only are we calling on God, but actually God also calls us. The Spirit is calling us. How will we respond to that call? How will we respond? And we started with the idea that we are called in different ways, and Sister Christine was called to be a nun, and Mary Funky was called to see God in her family. And but as Swami Vivekananda would say, I'll just read a little bit of his last, his lecture, his talk in New York on Sri Ramakrishna, where he said, "This is the message of Sri Ramakrishna to the modern world. Care not for doctrines or for dogmas, for sects or for churches. All these count for but little compared with the essence of existence which is in each one and is called spirituality. Therefore, my Master's message to the world is, be ye all spiritual. Get ye first realization. And to the young and the strong of every country, he would cry that the time is come for renunciation. Renounce for the sake of humanity. You have talked of the love of man till the thing is in danger of becoming words alone. The time is come to act. The call now is do. Leap into the breach and save the world." So inspiring words of Swami Vivekananda interpreting his Master's message. For the youth, a few at least, the time has come to renounce and leap into the breach and save the world. I'd like to just point out a couple of practical ideas for those of us who are leading householder life. We talked a lot about monks today, which might be too much, but there's a lot of good practical ideas we can get from it, like ownership. We can try not to take ownership of anything. Rather, we can be a caretaker. I know some devotees, actually the devotees in Iowa, there's a whole group of devotees, they've named their houses. Their houses are named. One of them called them Holy Mother's House, one of them has called it, I don't know, Vivekananda Bhavan or whatever. They've named their houses. So they're only the caretaker. It's not my house anymore, it's Holy Mother's house. I'm just taking care of it. What a wonderful idea, I love that. Even the car, we get so attached to our cars, so identified with our cars. It's my car. How dare you put a scratch on my car? You're going to pay to have it. I'm going to have to paint out this scratch. It's going to cost you. It's my car. How dare you? Okay, it's God's car. Let me call it God's car. It's not mine. It's God. I just take care of it. Yes, it's for my use. We can be steward of our funds rather than saying my money. All right. I dedicate it to God. I look after it. It's for the support of my family, but I will also have some extra for charitable purposes to help those who are in need, to maybe to support education or health or whatever I want to do with the funds. Like, there was that line in Dolly Parton. Wait, not Dolly Parton. Dolly Parton was famous for Hello, Dolly. Hello, Dolly was a musical. I saw it as a kid. And one quote in there was, "Money is like manure. It doesn't do any good if you collect it all in one pile. It's only good if you spread it around. If you spread it around in the fields all become fertilized. But if you keep it in one place, it becomes a stinking mess. So money is like that." And from time to time, as Ram just go into solitude, call on God, adopt that attitude. I don't want, what I really want deep in my heart of hearts is God alone. I may have to provide for my family. Yes, all right, I want some things. I want a new car. But actually, what I really want is God. And pray, taking refuge in God. Sri Ramakrishna's prayer. I throw myself on thy mercy. I take shelter at thy hallowed feet. We pray, we develop that relationship with God. So, in conclusion, just as the ancient sage called out, "Hear, ye children of immortal bliss," we also have to hear that. We have to hear that call. And the call of Sri Ramakrishna, "Oh, my children, come to me." The Spirit is always calling to us to be present here, to see the divine shining in everything, behind everything. It's calling us to know who we are. And if this were not so, our lives would be meaningless. But it is so. And therefore, ultimately, nothing else matters. So I leave it with you, this question: how will I, in my own life, respond to this call? The Spirit is always calling to us. How will I respond to this call? Each of us is called to respond in our own unique way. There's no one single way that everyone will have to follow the same path. We each have our own unique path, but we have to follow that path. How will we respond to the Spirit? That's the question that I leave with you today. And now we'll have the Arati, and we can sing those. I think we can sing together, no? Are we going to play the recording?